Omega pulled Alpha King from a burning field, then saw Fire bow in recognition of her sacrifice. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The sun had set, leaving the world cloaked in the eerie red glow of the fire. Smoke billowed in every direction, carried by the fierce winds that raged across the battlefield. The ground, scorched and cracked, was littered with the remains of what had once been a thriving forest. Amidst the chaos, a lone figure stood, facing the hellish scene unfolding before her. Lena Omega Sterling, a woman known for her unwavering courage and unmatched strength, was caught in a moment that would change the course of her life forever. The flames rose higher, crackling like a living beast, threatening to consume everything in its path. But it wasn't the fire that demanded her attention. It was the sight of him, Alpha King Ethan Matthews. He lay on the ground, unconscious, his body crushed by the debris of what was once a royal war chariot. His armor, once gleaming, was now charred and dented. His breaths were shallow, his life hanging by a thread. The sight of him in such a vulnerable state ignited something fierce within Lena. She had fought beside him through countless battles, trusted him with her life, and now, she would do everything to save him. With a determined glint in her eyes, Lena rushed toward him. The heat from the fire was unbearable, but it didn't stop her. She pushed forward, ignoring the pain in her legs, the exhaustion in her chest. Every step felt like an eternity, the roar of the flames growing louder with each passing second. Reaching Ethan, she bent down and assessed the damage. His breathing was weak, his pulse faint. She knew she had little time. Lena called upon the power within her, the fire that she had learned to control for so many years. With a single motion, she created a path through the flames, the fire bending around her as if it recognized her strength. The temperature soared, but she remained unshaken. She lifted Ethan into her arms, feeling the weight of his body as she struggled to keep him from slipping from her grasp. She moved with urgency, each step an act of will, fighting against the world that seemed to be falling apart around them. As she carried him through the inferno, Lena's thoughts were consumed by one singular goal: survival. She would get him out of this alive, no matter the cost. The fire seemed to fight back, the flames reaching for her, threatening to pull her back into their grasp. But she pushed on, her focus unyielding. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, Lena emerged from the fire, the world outside starkly contrasting the chaos she had just left behind. She collapsed to the ground, exhausted, but with Ethan still alive in her arms. She had done it. But it wasn't over. She could feel his pulse slowing. With no time to waste, Lena knew she had to act fast. She laid him down gently, her hands trembling as she checked his wounds. Her heart raced as she realized how close they had come to losing him. As she worked to stabilize him, she noticed something strange in the corner of her eye. A glimmer of light, like a spark, caught her attention. It was then that she saw it. A fire bow, glowing with an ethereal light, hovering just above the ground. The bow seemed to pulse with energy, its strings vibrating with the remnants of a power she couldn't yet understand. But in that moment, Lena knew what it meant. The fire bow wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol of sacrifice, of courage, of everything she had just given to save Ethan's life. It was her recognition. Her sacrifice had been seen. She reached out, her hand trembling as she took the bow in her grasp. In that instant, the flames around them seemed to quiet, as if the fire itself acknowledged her efforts. The fire bow pulsed with warmth, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Lena felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. She had done it. She had saved him, and now, she would be recognized for it. I never thought I'd find myself in this position. As Lena knelt beside Ethan, her hands trembling as she checked his pulse, she could feel the weight of the moment settling in. She had done the impossible. She had pulled him from the flames, but the battle wasn't over. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale and cold to the touch. He was alive, but barely. The fire bow, still glowing faintly in her grasp, reminded her that survival was only half the fight. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her. She had always been strong, but in this moment, the world felt heavier than ever. Lena's thoughts raced as she moved quickly to stabilize Ethan. She ripped the sleeves from her tunic, using them to create makeshift bandages for his wounds. The flames still burned in the distance, but here, in the quiet aftermath of chaos, Lena focused only on him. She had always believed that strength came from within, but this was something different. This wasn't just physical strength. This was a test of her heart, her resolve. It was a test of everything she had ever believed about herself. She had always been the protector, the one who fought to ensure others survived. But now, in the silence between them, she wondered if she had ever truly understood what it meant to sacrifice. Ethan stirred slightly, his eyes fluttering open. His gaze was unfocused at first, then slowly, he recognized her. His lips parted, trying to form words, but the effort was too much. Instead, he reached out weakly, his hand brushing against the fire bough in her grip. It was the only thing between them, the symbol of what she had given up to save him. Slowly, Lena moved the bough into his hand, pressing it gently into his grasp. Their fingers brushed for a moment, and in that instant, she felt something unspoken pass between them. A connection, deeper than words could express. Ethan's grip on the bough tightened, his eyes meeting hers with a look of gratitude and understanding. The weight of their shared history, of every battle they had fought together, was reflected in that simple gesture. He had always been the Alpha King, the one who led with strength and command. But now, in this moment, it was Lena who held the power. It was Lena who had saved him, and it was Lena who would carry them both forward. As the minutes passed, Lena continued to work on Ethan, her movement steady, her determination unwavering. She had always known how to fight, but now, she was learning what it meant to heal. The fire bough, still pulsing with light, was a constant reminder of the choice she had made. It was a choice that had cost her, but it was also a choice that had bound them together in a way nothing else ever could. In that moment, as the fire continued to burn in the distance and the world seemed to hold its breath, Lena knew one thing for certain. She would never leave his side. Together, they had survived the flames. Together, they would face whatever came next. Lena sat quietly beside Ethan, watching as the last of the smoke from the burning battlefield drifted away on the wind. The flames had receded, but the memories of the chaos would stay with them forever. She had saved him. He was still alive, still breathing, but the battle, the true battle, had only just begun. The fire bough, still resting by her side, was more than just a symbol of her sacrifice. It was a reminder of what they had been through, and of what was still ahead. Ethan stirred slightly, the faintest movement breaking the silence. His hand twitched, then slowly he opened his eyes. For a moment, his gaze was unfocused, distant, but then his eyes found hers. There was a quiet recognition in his stare, as if he could see into her very soul. "Lena," he whispered, his voice hoarse, barely audible. She met his gaze, her heart swelling with both relief and a quiet sadness. She had done everything she could to save him, but she could still see the toll it had taken on him. It wasn't just his physical wounds that needed tending. His spirit, his will, had been tested, and it would take time to heal. "You're safe now," she said softly, her voice full of both certainty and compassion. She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Rest. You'll need your strength." He nodded, though he looked at her as if he wanted to say more. His hand moved toward the fire bough, still resting beside her. His fingers brushed against the glowing weapon, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they shared. Lena understood without words. The bough was not just her tool, it was theirs. A bond forged in the heat of battle, sealed by sacrifice. She reached for it, lifting it gently, as though it were both fragile and powerful at the same time. "We've been through so much, Ethan," she said quietly, her voice full of the weight of their shared history. "But it's not over. We still have a long way to go." Ethan gave a weak smile, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I know," he whispered, "but we'll face it together." The world around them was quiet now, the fire having calmed, the smoke fading into the evening sky. It was a brief moment of peace, but even in that silence, Lena knew they could never truly rest. The world outside still burned. There were still enemies out there, still dangers waiting to strike. But for now, they were alive. And together, that was enough. The sun was setting on the horizon, casting the world in a soft, golden light. It felt like a new beginning, though Lena knew it was only a brief pause before the next challenge. She looked down at Ethan, who was resting now, his breathing slower, more steady. She stayed by his side, not daring to move too far. She knew he needed this time, this moment of quiet to gather his strength. She needed it too. And so, they sat in silence, the fire bow between them, a symbol of their shared bond, their shared sacrifice. Whatever lay ahead, Lena knew they would face it together. And with that thought, she allowed herself a small moment of peace, knowing they had survived the worst of it, for now. Lena watched the last remnants of the flames die down, the crackling sounds now replaced with the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. The battle had ended, but the quiet felt more like a beginning than an end. Ethan was still resting, his breath now steady, though he had yet to fully awaken. She had taken care of his wounds as best as she could, but his recovery would take time. She could only hope that time was on their side. The fire bow, still resting beside her, gleamed faintly in the dimming light of the evening. It felt like a weight she couldn't quite put down, a constant reminder of what she had done and what was still to come. For the first time in a long while, Lena allowed herself to sit still. The world around her had always been in motion. Fights to win, battles to survive, leaders to protect. But here, in this moment, there was only silence. Only the stillness of the night and the quiet breath of the man she had saved. She glanced at Ethan, his face peaceful for now. His once strong and proud demeanor had been stripped away by the fire, leaving behind a man who, like her, was not invincible. It was a humbling realization. She had always seen him as the Alpha King, the one who led, the one who never wavered. But here, in the stillness, he was just a man, like anyone else, vulnerable to the dangers of the world. The thought was strangely comforting. It was a reminder that no one was beyond help, that even the strongest among them could falter. Lena stood and stretched, her muscles aching from the long hours of tension and effort. She took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh air that was slowly beginning to replace the smoke. The fire had passed, but the scars would remain. Both the land and her soul bore the marks of the day. She walked slowly to the edge of their makeshift camp, her gaze falling on the horizon. The sun was sinking, casting the world in a warm, golden glow. It was a fleeting moment of peace, but it was enough. The quiet was soothing, but there was something more she had to do. They couldn't stay here forever. The world was still out there, waiting for them to face it. The enemy hadn't been defeated, not yet. And there were questions still unanswered. Lena turned back to Ethan, her heart heavy with the weight of their future. She knew they couldn't stay here much longer. The world outside was still in turmoil, and the fire they had survived was only a small part of the war that lay ahead. She had to prepare, not just for the battles to come, but for the changes that would come with them. She walked back to Ethan's side, her footsteps steady, her mind set on the path ahead. She wasn't just his protector anymore. They were in this together, as equals, as survivors. And whatever the future held, Lena knew they would face it side by side. Lena's thoughts were interrupted by the faint rustle of leaves as Ethan stirred once more. The night was growing colder, but his warmth, the steady rise and fall of his chest, was a comfort she hadn't realized she needed. She remained where she stood, watching over him as the stars above began to twinkle in the clear sky. The world had quieted down, but her mind was still racing. It felt as though a storm was brewing in the distance, though the calm of the moment suggested otherwise. The weight of the future loomed over them, and the fire bow, now resting by her side, reminded her that nothing would be easy from here on out. They had survived, yes, but survival alone was not enough. They had fought together before, and they would again, but something was different now. It was as if the bond between them had deepened in a way that neither had expected. Lena, ever the protector, felt a new sense of responsibility. She wasn't just guarding him from external dangers. She was guarding their future, their place in this chaotic world. And in her heart, she knew there was something more than just fighting left to be done. Ethan had not yet fully regained his strength, but she could see the fire in his eyes. It was the same fire she had seen the first time they met. The strength of a leader, a king, but also the vulnerability of a man who had nearly lost everything. It was a balance Lena had come to understand in the days they had spent together. She would never be able to protect him from everything, but together, they were stronger than they ever could be apart. A soft groan escaped his lips, and Lena quickly turned her attention back to him. His eyes flickered open, locking onto hers. There was something in his gaze now, a quiet determination, as though he was already planning their next move. "We need to keep moving," he whispered, his voice still rough from his injuries. Lena nodded, her own resolve hardening. "I know," she replied, her voice steady. She helped him sit up slowly, her hands gentle but firm, guiding him through the movement. They couldn't afford to stay here any longer. The fire had burned, the smoke had cleared, but the dangers in the world were far from over. There were still battles to fight, allies to find, and enemies to outsmart. The fire bow, glowing softly beside her, seemed to pulse with an energy that matched the fire inside her. Together, they had survived, but the road ahead was long, and it was far from certain. But Lena was ready. She had faced the fire once before, and she would face it again, by Ethan's side. The night air was still, the only sounds the rustle of the leaves and the distant calls of creatures hidden in the shadows. The world around them seemed at peace, but Lena knew better. She stood tall, her gaze fixed ahead. The journey was only beginning, but she was no longer just a protector. She was a partner, a warrior, and together with Ethan, they would face whatever came their way. Lena helped Ethan rise to his feet, her hands steady and confident as she guided him. The wounds he had sustained were not life-threatening anymore, but they were far from healed. His movements were slow, his body still weighed down by fatigue, but his determination was palpable. He may have been weakened, but the strength of his will had not diminished. Together, they moved forward, each step heavy, but with purpose. The fire bow, still glowing faintly at Lena's side, was a constant reminder of the trials they had already faced. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol of their survival, of the bond they shared. Ethan looked to the horizon, his gaze distant, as if already contemplating their next move. There was something about the stillness of the night that seemed to sharpen his focus. He turned to Lena, his voice softer now, more measured. "We need to find shelter. We can't keep moving like this. The land is still too dangerous." Lena nodded, understanding his words. She had always known the world was unforgiving, but something in his tone made her realize just how fragile their situation was. The journey ahead was uncertain, but they couldn't afford to stay in the open for too long. The fire had not just ravaged the land. It had sent ripples throughout the surrounding areas. New threats, new challenges, waited for them in the shadows. They needed to find allies, those who could help them navigate the dangers that still loomed. And most importantly, they needed time. Time to recover, time to plan, and time to truly heal. "We'll find shelter," Lena said with quiet resolve. "But we won't stop moving. We can't afford to let our guard down. Not yet." Ethan met her gaze, his eyes filled with gratitude. The fire, the destruction, it had brought them to this moment, but it had also forged something between them that neither could have anticipated. A partnership that had surpassed the traditional roles they had once played. Lena had always been the protector, the one to shield others from harm. But now, she was more than that. She was a partner in every sense of the word. As they continued walking through the darkened landscape, the air growing cooler with each step, Lena couldn't help but feel a shift in herself. She had always known what it meant to fight, but she was beginning to understand what it meant to survive, to endure, alongside someone else. It was a different kind of strength. The world around them was still burning, but together, they were facing it. The road ahead was uncertain, but as long as they had each other, they could weather any storm. Lena's heart beat steady, in rhythm with the path they now walked together. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but they would face it, side by side, as equals. And that was enough. For now, Lena and Ethan continued their journey through the night, the moon casting a pale light over the desolate landscape. The once thriving woods now stood silent, the remnants of the fires still smoldering in places. The air was thick with the scent of burnt earth and ash. Every step they took felt heavy, as if the weight of the world itself was pressing down on them. Ethan had grown stronger in the hours since they had moved, but his recovery was far from complete. His steps were slow, but the fire in his eyes had returned, a quiet determination that reminded Lena of the man he had once been, before the flames had nearly consumed them both. "We should be nearing the shelter by now," Lena said, her voice cutting through the stillness of the night. She had been keeping an eye on the terrain, every movement calculated as she scanned their surroundings. They couldn't afford to be careless. Not now, not when they were so close. Ethan nodded, his brow furrowed. "I hope so. We can't keep going much longer without rest." His voice was strained, though there was no weakness in his words. It was the mark of a king, the same resolve that had always guided him, even in the darkest of times. Lena smiled faintly. She had never imagined a time when they would be walking side by side like this, their roles shifting in a way neither had expected. She had always been the one to protect, to lead the charge. But now, they were both navigating this uncertain path together, relying on one another in ways that neither had anticipated. The silence stretched on as they continued forward, the landscape growing more barren with each passing mile. The fire bow, resting at Lena's side, still hummed softly, as though it was alive with energy. She wondered if it would always be a part of them now, if it would always serve as a reminder of their shared sacrifice, the fire that had tested them both in ways they hadn't been ready for. As the hours passed, the sounds of the night grew quieter. The distant calls of birds and animals had long since faded, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the outline of a small structure appeared in the distance. A simple stone cabin, tucked away in the heart of the forest. It was unassuming, but to Lena and Ethan, it was a beacon of safety. They approached cautiously, eyes scanning the surroundings. The shelter was secluded, hidden from any prying eyes. It was exactly what they needed. "We're here," Lena said, her voice soft but filled with relief. Ethan's expression softened, and for the first time in what felt like days, he allowed himself to relax. They had found safety, even if only for a short time. Lena helped Ethan toward the cabin, her hands steady and sure as she guided him to the door. As they stepped inside, the warmth of the cabin enveloped them, the flickering light from a nearby fire casting long shadows across the room. The shelter was sparse, but it was enough. It was a place where they could rest, where they could plan. Lena helped Ethan sit by the fire, then went to work tending to the small collection of supplies that had been left behind. She knew they couldn't stay long, but for the first time in days, they had a chance to breathe. The weight of the world, if only for a moment, had lifted. And for that brief moment, Lena allowed herself to close her eyes and feel the peace that came from simply being alive, knowing that no matter what the future held, they had each other. Lena sat across from Ethan, the crackling fire casting flickering shadows on the stone walls of their temporary refuge. The warmth of the fire was comforting, but it couldn't erase the exhaustion that weighed on them both. The events of the past days had been relentless, each moment a test of strength, resolve, and survival. Yet here they were, in a small, humble cabin, with a brief moment of peace. Ethan's recovery was slow, but every sign of progress brought hope. He had regained some color, and his breathing had become less labored. Still, Lena knew that he wasn't fully recovered. The battle they had fought against the flames was nothing compared to the war that still awaited them. She could see the tension in his eyes as he gazed into the fire. His mind was always active, always planning, even when his body demanded rest. She couldn't blame him. The world was uncertain, and there were many more dangers ahead. "We can't stay here forever," Ethan finally spoke, his voice rough but steady. "We need to move on, find more allies." Lena looked at him, her heart swelling with a mix of affection and concern. She had never imagined this moment. The two of them, seeking solace in each other's company. The world had always been about survival, about fighting to the next day. But with Ethan, things were different. They were no longer just allies in battle. They had become something more. A partnership, not born of obligation, but of shared purpose. "I know," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "But we can't rush it. We need time. Time to heal, to think." Ethan nodded slowly, though there was a faraway look in his eyes. "Time is something we don't have much of." The weight of his words lingered in the air, thick and heavy. It was true, time was running out. Their enemies were still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. And even if They found allies. There was no guarantee that help would come in time. The fire bow, resting by Lena's side, caught her attention once more. She hadn't yet fully understood the power it held, but she felt its presence deeply. It was a connection between them, between their past and their future. It was a symbol of sacrifice, of survival, and of the bond that had been forged in the flames. Lena picked up the bow, feeling its warmth against her fingertips. She couldn't help but wonder if it was meant for something more, if it was the key to the next chapter of their journey. She turned it over in her hands, contemplating its purpose, when Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts. "Do you think we'll ever find peace?" he asked quietly, his eyes meeting hers. The question hung in the air, unanswered. Lena knew the truth. Peace was a fleeting thing, a luxury that didn't belong in their world. But for a moment, she allowed herself to dream of it, a future where the fighting was over, where they could live without the constant threat of war. "Maybe," she said, her voice steady but with a hint of hope. "Maybe one day." Ethan didn't respond, but the faintest smile tugged at the corner of his lips. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For now, it was enough. The night stretched on, the fire burning low as they sat in comfortable silence. The future was uncertain, but for tonight, they had each other. And that, for now, was enough. Lena sat by the fire, her gaze fixed on the crackling flames, though her thoughts were far from the warmth. Ethan, resting beside her, had fallen into a deep sleep, the steady rhythm of his breathing a sound she had come to rely on. The peacefulness of the moment felt fragile, like a thin thread that could break at any moment. They had made it this far, but Lena knew they couldn't afford to linger for long. They had come to this cabin seeking respite, but the world outside hadn't stopped turning. The battles were still out there, waiting for them, and even the smallest delay could cost them dearly. She stood, quietly, so as not to disturb Ethan, and moved to the small window. The world beyond was dark, the silhouettes of trees barely visible in the shadows. The wind had picked up, rustling the branches outside. It was a quiet, almost eerie stillness. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the peace they had found here was only temporary. They were never truly safe. The thought weighed heavily on her mind as she stared out into the darkness. She couldn't stop thinking about what lay ahead, the unknown dangers, the people they still had to find, the choices they had yet to make. The fire bow, still resting by her side, felt like a constant reminder of everything they had endured and everything that was yet to come. It had been a symbol of survival, of sacrifice, but now it felt like it held a deeper meaning. It was as if it was waiting for something. Lena wasn't sure what, but she knew that it wasn't just a weapon. It was a key to something much larger, something that would shape their future in ways they couldn't predict. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of movement behind her. She turned to see Ethan stirring, his eyes slowly opening. He looked at her, confusion and weariness in his gaze, but there was something else there too. A quiet determination, a strength that had not been there when they first met. He was different now, as was she. The journey they had undertaken together had changed them both in ways neither could have imagined. He sat up slowly, leaning against the wall of the cabin. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice hoarse but steady. Lena nodded, offering him a reassuring smile. "I'm fine. Just thinking." Ethan nodded, though he seemed to sense the weight of her thoughts. He didn't press her to explain, knowing that words wouldn't do justice to what they were both feeling. "We'll keep moving tomorrow," he said quietly. "There's no more time to waste." His words were a reminder of the harsh reality they faced. They couldn't afford to stop, not for long. They had to keep moving forward, even if they didn't know exactly where they were headed. Lena took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. "I know," she replied softly. "But for tonight, let's just rest." Ethan's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift. They were together. They were alive. And that, for now, was enough. They both leaned back, the fire crackling between them, the warmth of it mingling with the stillness of the night. The future was uncertain, but they had each other. And for tonight, that was all they needed.